America's veterans returned to a hero's welcome and high hopes that the worst was finally over. After 15 years of depression and war, their aspirations had been strained to the breaking point. With the coming of peacetime, the dam burst wide open, releasing a torrent of dreams deferred and hopes postponed. The old order was washed away, and in its place rose, in some respects, a new America.
My father never talked much about the war. Not until he was in his 80s did he tell us many stories about his time on Iwo Jima. He was looking ahead after the horrors of World War II, not to the troubled past. His entire generation was determined to build a new world, one that would make up for all the years of worry and want, struggle and sacrifice. The result was a series of explosions that rattled the entire nation. A baby boom, a housing boom, a suburban boom, and a record-shattering economic boom. Milwaukee, like America, was transformed. My family, like so many others, entered a new dimension.
Babies came first. Hard times and wartime had been no time to start a family. Milwaukee's birth rate fell to its historic low during the Depression and rebounded only slightly during the war. A baby boom began 9 months after the Allied victory and continued for nearly 20 years. The baby boom sparked an intense housing boom. 15 years of depression and war had brought all development to a halt. Returning veterans faced the most desperate housing shortage since pioneer days. Hundreds of families were forced to live in temporary homes, some in trailers on the lakefront, others in prefabricated houses on county parkland. It was not until the mid-1950s that supply finally caught up with demand. There was nothing especially elegant about the houses that appeared. The most common were Cape Cods, many with doghouse dormers, ranch houses, and plain brick apartment buildings. Elegant or not, Milwaukee's post-war homes met an urgent need for shelter, and they met it with amazing speed. By 1960, the county's housing stock had increased by more than a third.
My own family fit the post-war patterns to a T. My mother and father met and married during the war. She was a Red Cross worker on an Army base where he was stationed. When my father returned from the Pacific, he moved into his old room above the family hardware store. My mother and sister stayed with an aunt. In 1946, my parents bought their first home, this prefab Cape Cod on South 34th Street. It cost a total of $5,600, lot included. I was born here a year later, and 2 more sons followed. In 1955, as the kids got bigger and the house got smaller, my parents moved a few miles southwest to this ranch home in Hales Corners. The local grade school was soon overwhelmed. Classes mushroomed to alarming sizes, and new additions couldn't be built fast enough. The basic outline of my family story was repeated literally millions of times in this block, throughout Milwaukee, and across the nation.
Those millions of families had much in common, including a taste for the latest post-war conveniences. Between 1946 and 1965, Milwaukee's electric power consumption per household more than tripled. The most popular appliance was something new: the television. Milwaukee's first station, WTMJ-TV, signed on at the end of 1947. There were only 1,000 sets in the area at the time. 10 years later, more than 97% of local households owned one. Television programs offered a high-gloss reflection of what life was supposed to be like in the 50s. Father knew best, Mom was in the kitchen, and we left it to Beaver. Real life went on without a laugh track, of course. But television lifted up new cultural icons that had enormous appeal. The most powerful icon in post-war America was the automobile. The number of cars in Milwaukee County nearly doubled in the first post-war decade. It was the automobile, of course, that made Milwaukee's outward expansion possible. It also spawned an entirely new form of commerce, the shopping center. Southgate was Milwaukee's first. When it opened in 1951, nearly 60,000 people flocked to South 27th Street, snarling traffic for hours. The automobile left a more pervasive mark on the landscape. As the number of cars in Milwaukee multiplied, streets built for horses and trolleys were overwhelmed. The solution to gridlock, everyone agreed, was expressways. Milwaukee adopted its first freeway plan in 1946, and construction began 6 years later. The first segment of Interstate 94 opened in Waukesha County in 1958. Governor Vernon Thompson did the honors, with a little help from Miss Concrete and Miss Blacktop. As the post-war boom gathered steam, freeway construction was practically continuous. And what fueled Milwaukee's continuing boom? What paid for all the cars and TV sets and freeways? Industrial prosperity. As pent-up consumer demand sought its outlet, local factories roared from defense work to peacetime production without missing a beat. Millions of automobiles rode on A.O. Smith frames. Millions of consumers used electricity generated by Alice Chalmers turbines. Industries everywhere relied on coal and metals mined by Bucyrus Erie shovels. Aerospace firms turned to the Laddish Company for high-quality forging. And there were still old standbys, like beer. Breweries accounted for only 2% of the area's employment in 1948, but returning servicemen showed a powerful thirst for Milwaukee-made suds. It took just 6 years for the county's industrial output to double after the war. Milwaukee and America seemed to be soaring ever upward in a spiral of self-generating prosperity. The new age called for new leaders. Mayor John Bone, who succeeded the charismatic Carl Zeidler, ended his caretaker administration in 1948 when he was 80 years old. Bone's successor was Frank Zeidler, Carl's younger brother. Earnest, intellectual, and idealistic, Zeidler emerged from a crowded field to win the city's top job in 1948. And he stayed in office until 1960.
The functions of a mayor of any large city in America are very heavy and very numerous. They can be divided into 3 different categories. In the first category, the mayor is the chief administrative officer of the city. In the second capacity, the mayor is the principal greeter and the chief ceremonial officer of the community. In his third category, he must be a civic leader, sometimes even a political leader, in order to get across a proper kind of a program for the development and progress of the city.
Frank Zeidler was a socialist in the tradition of Dan Hoan and Victor Berger. The party itself was no longer a political force. New Deal Democrats had captured its base of support. But Zeidler's socialist beliefs were his guiding star. "We participate in local government," he once said, "in order that by our participation there may emerge nobler beings with enlarged concepts of liberty, truth, justice, cooperation, peace, and righteousness." Those ideals breathed new life into Milwaukee's tradition of municipal enterprise. One expression of that tradition was an aggressive annexation campaign. Convinced that Milwaukee had to grow or die in the post-war era, Zeidler's team doubled the city's land area in 12 short years. Annexation was always voluntary, but city water and city services were hard to resist. Such growth was practically unheard of among the nation's older cities. As her sisters stagnated, Milwaukee absorbed scores of subdivisions that were suburban in everything but name, and made room for new industries to grow and old ones to relocate. Much of Milwaukee's new territory was farmland. Some visitors are amazed to find that there are still cornfields inside the city limits in the 21st century. Although the city was growing fast, its suburbs were growing even faster. It had taken a half-century for Milwaukee's first 11 suburbs to form. The next 8 appeared in a single burst between 1950 and 1957. As would-be suburbs tried to organize, Milwaukee continued to take in land, often block by block and acre by acre. The battle lines were frozen in 1957, when the city of Greenfield became Milwaukee's last neighbor to incorporate.
The result was a hopelessly tangled borderline. To this day, there are curbs and sidewalks here on the Milwaukee side, but not in Greenfield. Some families actually eat in one community and sleep in the other. But the incorporation of Greenfield had broader significance. It completed what Frank Zeidler called the iron ring of suburbs encircling the city. The Milwaukee Journal described the last link in that ring as a minor tragedy.
The whole picture is indeed tragic in the sense that it is frustrating, inefficient, expensive, and unintelligent. Every last acre of Milwaukee County is now incorporated in a jumble of 10 cities and 9 villages, all being one community, really.
With the political fragmentation of Milwaukee County complete, the suburban wave surged outward to neighboring counties. Waukesha County's growth was especially dramatic. Once a national center of dairy farming, Waukesha became better known for housing developments than Holsteins, and the rural way of life faded with the sunset over the western hills. Milwaukee's lifeblood seemed to be draining away to the edges after World War II. The Depression and war had stopped downtown development in its tracks, and there were few signs of new activity when peacetime returned. A correspondent for The New Yorker took a jaundiced look at the heart of the city.
No new large office building has been put up in downtown Milwaukee in more than 20 years. And the skyline, if approached from Lake Michigan, gives the impression of a city that had its picture taken around 1920 and liked the results so much that it decided to leave matters alone.
New buildings began, ever so slowly, to erase that impression. The arena doubled Milwaukee's convention space and provided room for professional indoor sports. In 1957, the War Memorial Center gave Milwaukee its first major piece of modern architecture, a soaring design by Eero Saarinen. The structure's best-known tenant was the Milwaukee Arts Center. The Marine Bank, Milwaukee's oldest financial institution, built another modernist icon on the downtown riverfront a few years later. And Milwaukee's Greeks moved into their Frank Lloyd Wright-designed home in Wauwatosa. The University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee rose from the foundation of the old State Teachers College in 1956. Enrollment quickly surged to 25,000. These and other new landmarks were all welcome additions to the Milwaukee scene. They marked a community whose star was on the rise. But one new structure stood alone as a symbol of Milwaukee's big league aspirations: County Stadium. Building it was a staggering leap of faith for a community that no one has ever mistaken for impetuous. Milwaukee put up a major league ballpark without the slightest assurance that a team was available. Build it, said civic leaders, and they will come. Those leaders were right. In 1953, the Boston Braves, parent team of the minor league Brewers, became the Milwaukee Braves. Fan support verged on the fanatical. Thousands showed up just to watch infield practice. The Braves set a National League attendance record in their first season. The story just kept getting better. In 1957, the Braves won the pennant and faced the New York Yankees in the World Series. When a Yankee offhandedly described local fans as Bush League, the series became a contest between big city vice and small city virtue, between might and right. It took a full 7 games, but right prevailed. the streets of downtown Milwaukee overflowed in a spontaneous outpouring of joy.
County Stadium is just a memory today. It was torn down to make way for Miller Park, and this Little League field now fills the site. But what happened here capped a remarkable period in Milwaukee's history. In the 15 years following World War II, Milwaukee entered the big leagues and then conquered them. The city's population reached an all-time high in 1960, rising to 11th place in the country. New families were formed, new landmarks emerged, and the economy soared to new heights of prosperity. For a few years on either side of 1960, Milwaukee was at a peak of civic self-confidence. Before long, however, it would be harder and harder to ignore the effects of gravity.